Well, I'm joined now by Pakistani National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf, joining us tonight from Islamabad. And it's good to have you with us. We were due to speak the night that the Taliban actually announced this interim government. Before we talk about the makeup of that government, sir, what came out of the Bill Burns meeting with Pakistan's army chief and, as I understand it, the ISI chief there as well?
Look, I mean, these are consultations, Becky, that continue. The US intelligence chief was here talking about the situation, of course, in Afghanistan, talking about the threat of terrorism. And that's something that Pakistan's been raising again and again. You know, you have to understand where Pakistan comes from. A 1,600-mile border with Afghanistan. For 4 decades, instability has spilled over from Afghanistan into Pakistan. Just since 9/11, we've lost over 80,000 people, $150 billion in the economy, and over 3.5 million internally displaced people. Why? Because the terrorists turned on us after we started supporting the US once 9/11 had taken place. For this country, for Pakistan, instability in Afghanistan is an existential problem. And that's why we are talking to all countries who matter, counseling that they must engage the new reality in Afghanistan. We must make sure there is no economic meltdown, because if there is, like the 1990s when the world abandoned Afghanistan, what came? A mass migration, a refugee crisis, and a security vacuum filled by international terrorist organizations.
Well, let's talk about what happens going forward. U.S. Secretary, hang on. I hear what you're saying. I want to press forward on this, because I certainly get the sense from you of where you are at. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has been touring the region. He had this to say about the challenges of the U.S. now not being present on the ground in Afghanistan. Have a listen.
There's no question that it will be more difficult to identify and engage threats that emanate from the region, but we're committed to making sure that threats are not allowed to develop and create significant challenges for us in the homeland.
Now, you have talked about, you know, the need for cooperation going forward. Will we see more cooperation from Pakistan on the fight against terrorism coming from Afghanistan going forward?
When have you not? I told you the kind of support we provided and the kind of cost we've paid for it. Pakistan's always been there on the right side of the international community. For us, this is the issue. We cannot afford instability in Afghanistan. We have to do whatever we can. We are engaged with Afghanistan. Disengagement is simply not an option for us. But the cooperation, Becky, has to be under a legal framework. There can be no boots on the ground of any foreign country in Pakistan. Pakistan cannot partner unless it is mandated and sanctioned under international law. After 9/11, this was a mistake that was made. One thing was said, another thing was done by the US, with all due respect, and others, and Pakistan suffered. So we will be transparent, we will cooperate, we'll cooperate within the bounds of international law, and there will be no infringement of Pakistani sovereignty. But the more important point is, rather than constantly talking about, oh, there is a security vacuum, we must do something about it, let's first cooperate to avert that. Why talk about managing a refugee crisis, managing a security problem? Let's engage the reality in Afghanistan. Let's incentivize good behavior. And by doing that, get to a governance model that provides for the average Afghan. And there is no need for a security vacuum, because the country would be stable. This is where Pakistan wants to go. And Pakistan is willing to work with the international community in ensuring that Afghanistan is peaceful and stable. But the engagement has to come from the West, because that's where the legitimacy lies for the Taliban.
Let's talk about what's going on in the country, because the National Resistance Front has accused Pakistan of using drones to support the Taliban offensive against resistance forces in the Panjshir Valley. I spoke to the group's spokesman, Ali Nazari, on this show yesterday, who expanded on that. Iran's foreign ministry has also condemned, quote, foreign interference. Did the Pakistani army support the Taliban attack on the anti-Taliban forces in Panjshir using drones and or other weaponry?
It's preposterous is all I can say. But let me tell you why this question even gets to the point where Becky Anderson has to ask Pakistan's National Security Advisor. For 2 decades, Becky, Pakistan is the only country that kept saying that Project Afghanistan is failing because of internal problems in Afghanistan. The army won't fight. The government is not credible. It is not going to work with the kind of corruption. But what was the world saying? Oh, Pakistan is the problem. This was the bogey, this was the scapegoating by governments in Kabul, which unfortunately the international community started believing because they didn't want to talk about their own failure. And you say drones and Pakistani support? Let me show you what is happening. I wonder if your audience can see this. This is very important. This is mainstream Indian media showing a picture of an American jet flying over Wales in the UK and presenting it as Pakistan doing something in Panjshir. There have been millions of dollars spent by India, our arch rival, in creating a fake news network, in creating a bogey, and that's what the world has faced. That's why the world was embarrassed. Let's move beyond this.
Okay, that's your position, and we've heard, and we have heard the position of the Indians as well. And I certainly saw that image tweeted on your site as well. I've given you the opportunity to say, but hang on, sir. Hang on. I want to ask you what you make of the announcement of the Taliban government and just how involved was Pakistan in its makeup?
Let me first just say that I want your audience to know that international media has done major exposés on the fake news network run by India. Pakistan only wants peace and stability in Afghanistan. It's a sovereign country. We have to accept that there is a reality there. That's not of Pakistan's making, but now we must do the right thing in terms of where things must head in Afghanistan.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a specific question here. Go on.
No, all yours.
The specific question was Pakistan involved in the makeup of this government? I mean, why would the head of the ISI spend so much time in Kabul at this point if Islamabad isn't directly involved in the formation of this government?
Why did the CIA director Bill Burns go to Afghanistan much before my ISI chief went there? Was he involved in the makeup?
Because the Americans were working with the Afghans in the past.
So let me tell you why the ISI chief was there and will be there again.
Right.
Because we have a 1,600-mile border. We are worried that undesirable elements, ISIS, Pakistani Taliban, other terrorists can cross over. We've got to engage with the new government to make sure our border is secure. The world, including the US, is asking us every day to facilitate more evacuation from Afghanistan. By the way, we've evacuated 12,000 people already, including Americans. So if we want to negotiate with the government there to make sure the evacuations happen through Pakistan, how do you do that without a conversation? And let me also say, I think these conspiracy theories at least have to be logical. An intelligence chief goes, sits with his colleagues in broad daylight in the Serena Hotel, is interviewed by media. He's on a secret mission. Look, Pakistan has a right to defend its national security. We will do that. We are engaged. We will engage on only one thing. How to secure my country, how to ensure peace and stability in Afghanistan. That is my right. It will continue. Let's get beyond these conspiracy theories and think about how to coordinate as the international community and help the average Afghan who is suffering, who doesn't have food, who's staring a humanitarian crisis in the face. Let's get on politics.
Let's just be clear. Let's just be clear. I certainly didn't suggest that was a secret meeting, but you have addressed why he was there. You still haven't addressed whether Pakistan was involved in the formation of the government, but be that as it may. Let's talk. Hang on, sir. Hang on. Let's talk about what you've just suggested. Let's talk about safety and security going forward. We've seen the Taliban, the Pakistani Taliban, ramp up attacks along and near the border of Pakistan lately. Do you think groups like the Pakistan Taliban, or TPP, have been energized by the success of the Afghan Taliban? And how concerned are you about their strength at the moment?
Yeah, first, I don't want to leave that unanswered. Absolutely nothing to do with the government. It's a sovereign country. There is a new reality, and anybody who wants to deal with it must do so directly. I found out from the television screens, just like perhaps you did. So I want to be absolutely clear. I think we need to end this conversation once and for all. If there is any country or a region that has leverage over the Taliban, it's the West. It's the West that's going to provide them or not provide them legitimacy and assistance, not Pakistan. So let's be clear about that. As far as the Pakistani Taliban are concerned, yes, I think there is this space that they have felt that there's been, no control for a while, for a few days. There were jails that were broken. The Taliban released prisoners. There were Pakistani Taliban in them as well. So I do think there is a moment where they think they have greater flexibility and opportunity to attack and undermine Pakistan. That's perhaps why you've seen some of the attacks. And that's one of the main reasons our intelligence chief had to be there to make sure that this is not repeated, because all these people are in Afghanistan. And we very much expect, we've been public about this, that Afghan soil is not allowed to be used by any sort of terrorists against any country. But as I told you, Pakistan, because of geography, bears most of the pain and the brunt for what comes out of Afghanistan. So yes, we are worried. We are working on this, and we will ensure that Pakistan is not allowed to be destabilized by any actor in the region, in Afghanistan or in India, that for 20 years has been working with hostile intelligence agencies to do that. We are on it, but we will engage with Afghanistan to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Finally, we have seen a lot of anti-Pakistan protests on the streets of many Afghan cities, some raw anger. I want our viewers and you just to have a listen to this.
I have come today to ask why Pakistan is destroying Panjshir. I am from Panjshir. The people need to express their anger. Men and women, they must not stay silent. Pakistan enters my country and destroys it. Neither Pakistan nor the Taliban nor Al-Qaeda have this right. Long live Panjshir and its resistance.
I just wonder, how can you explain these anti-Pakistan protests, death to the ISI, as we heard many chants over the weekend, protests of hundreds of Afghan men and women? They certainly seem convinced of Pakistan's involvement in their country's affairs.
I'll say three things to you, Becky. First of all, I think you'd have to take a closer look at the hundreds. I don't think that's true. But yes, it is true that the minds have been poisoned over 20 years. There has been a narrative floated, as I told you, where Pakistan was used as a scapegoat for the average Afghan. Let me just read something to you. Then President Ashraf Ghani, days before he fled the country, tells the US president, we are facing a full-scale invasion composed of Taliban, Pakistani planning and logistic support, 10 to 15,000 international terrorists. Are we mad that 10 to 15,000 people are crossing from Pakistan and nobody notices? So this has been a fabrication of reality that's been created. But the real answer I want to give you is Afghan and Pakistanis are brothers and sisters. We host 4 million of them even today. Every day 25,000 cross over and go back. Divided families, divided villages, a bond and an affection that is unknown and unheard of anywhere else in the world. That's the real Afghan, that's the real Afghanistan. Those are the conversations. If you can get 10 people on a CNN screen, Becky, that's not reality. You need to dig deeper in this. Afghanistan and Pakistan go back centuries. There is no way our societies can't connect, and be together. That's why our border was so
Right.
porous all these years. There was no way to stop anybody. Everybody wants to move around. So I think this is really made up out of proportion. Pakistan will work for stability of Afghanistan. Afghans know that. We have no other interest. And our goal to encourage the world to engage is also for the sake of the average Afghan and for Pakistan's own security, which is my responsibility. And I will do that in a very unapologetic way, working with Afghanistan and the international community, including the US. And that's why we've had very good meetings with the CIA director who is present here.
And with that, we'll leave it there. The images speak 1,000 words, sir, so please don't ever accuse us of making things up. The images speak 1,000 words, but you have been given a lot of time to address some of these concerns that are out there, and we very much appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed
Thank you
for joining us.
Very kind.